Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
So I'm going to ask a question, and I promise this is not a trick question, and no one is going to get into trouble. But I would like you to state, hypothetically, of course, what are the most common reasons to not keep kosher? To not keep kosher.
It's inconvenient.
It's inconvenient, right? Keeping kosher is kind of a pain. I mean, after all, if we want to keep kosher, that means we're checking labels, we're checking ingredients, we are separating out our dishes into different piles, we have 2 different sets of pots and pans, and, well, wait, isn't that pretty much it? Is that really that much harder than, I mean, do you not read ingredients or look at labels when you buy things in the supermarket normally? Do you walk through the supermarket blindfolded and just grab things and put it in the cart and then hope that you get something that will make a meal?
Yes.
Or don't you already pay attention to what you're buying, if nothing else, the price nowadays? And, you know, having a few extra pots and pans, I mean, well, that's not such a tragedy. I mean, don't many people have like their fancy copper pots and then their regular pots and then the pot they have for their egg and then they have their air fryer and then they have all of the other gadgets to handle the different things. It's not really that much more inconvenient. But maybe you meant there aren't as many restaurants we can go to because we don't have a whole range of kosher restaurants here in Central Florida. And that is true. And that is a disappointment. But there are a lot of things that a person can eat even out that will still be kosher. It may limit some of her options. But is that the same thing as inconvenience? If I have to have a salad rather than have a cheeseburger, am I being inconvenienced? Or am I just being asked to change a few things? Maybe that feels like inconvenience. Let's see if we have other options. Maybe there are other good explanations for not keeping kosher. Because inconvenience is definitely one of the most common ones I hear, although I'm beginning to suspect that doesn't stand up to as much scrutiny.
You're in a situation your life depends on it. Let's say you're in the desert or a wilderness and there's only just, let's say, a rabbit, and that's all you have to eat.
And you're lucky if you can catch it. So definitely if you are in an emergency situation, all bets are off. Not quite the situation I'm talking about. I'm not talking about life or death. Not keeping kashrut. I mean the fact that, this may come as a shock, the majority of Jews don't keep kosher to one degree or another. So what explanation is there for not keeping kosher?
The restraint of saying no to something tasty.
For some people, it's why should I say no? Right? If I like something, why should I say no? It's my life, it's my body, my taste buds. And if I want to fill it with lobster, well, have you tasted lobster? I mean, it's a pretty compelling argument right there. I mean, how could it possibly be that a truly beautiful and benevolent God would ever tell me I'm not allowed to eat lobster? I mean, it's just glorious. And by the way, yes, I grew up not keeping kosher and I know exactly what lobster tastes like. And it is a pretty amazing flavor. But again, isn't that really just saying, I don't believe God actually cares about this? Because we do limit ourselves for a lot of other activities. If you know, we see somebody attractive walking down the street and we're already married to someone else, we don't start flirting and say, it's my life, it's my body, who are you to tell me I can't commit adultery? Most of us, at least, I hope, have a limit within ourselves that would say, yeah, but that would be wrong. If you don't see that as being a problem, perhaps when you're walking through the bank and you see the piles of cash and you say, it's my life, it's my pockets, I should be able to fill it with cash. What's wrong with simply stealing? And apart from the police catching you, most of us still also think that it's wrong to do those things. We do show restraint for our desires in a myriad of other cases, even if we don't when it comes to our food, which I believe shows an underlying ideology that maybe God doesn't actually care what we eat. Maybe God didn't actually tell us what to eat. Maybe that part of the Torah was invented by people and thus has a lower sanctity level and is not as important. Or maybe, one of the arguments I've heard from many different people, maybe it was just an early form of health code. That, eating shrimp and other things in the wrong season, that can be really, really unhealthy. So maybe God was just telling our people to stay safe. Pig, trichinosis, that can be a real problem, and just stay away from it and stay safe. Well, again, that begins to crumble under just the rudimentary examination because, first of all, there are billions of people who are the descendants of people that ate all of those things. It did not appear to wipe out their populations, nor is there any evidence that the ancient Israelites were in general healthier from the food they ate compared to the food that the non-Jews were eating. Doesn't really feel like this was health legislation. And add on top of that, as most of us can tell you, keeping kosher does not mean always eating healthy. You can eat a lot of junk food and it still is kosher. You can eat that entire pack of Oreos and they've got a nice hechsher on them these days. But I wouldn't necessarily say that that was a good health plan.
But Rabbi,
Yes.
isn't a big problem is that a lot of people consider it to be a statutory rule, and it's hard to comply with things when you don't understand the reasoning behind it.
It's hard to understand. I mean, after all, even if I do believe that this is divine, God didn't give us many explanations. He just said, don't eat this, it's okay to eat that, and I don't find that spiritually compelling. As it's classically called, it's kitchen Judaism. Where is the spirituality to be found in deciding to eat from a cow rather than from a pig? God doesn't explain it in the Torah. I don't find any of the explanations over the last 2,000 plus years from our tradition to be compelling. So if I don't feel the vibe of the commandment, then I'm not going to engage with it. I'd like to posit something, because we need to wrap this up, but we can continue to argue about not keeping kosher in the Kiddush, or the Oneg. But I'd like to posit something, which is that all of these explanations are not the real explanation. I don't mean the real explanation as in there is a good explanation for not keeping kosher, God forbid. But that many people have decided not to keep kosher for some other reason, and then they will advance a superficial reason for why they have chosen not to keep kosher. But this rationalization, this paper explanation, is often built on things that when we examine it, when we push at the surface of it, begin to crumble. That when we really look into whether or not it's even consistent, it doesn't work. I mean, after all, if someone were to say, I don't find it compelling to keep kosher because there are no clear explanations in the Torah for the reason for doing this, fine. Does that same person then keep all of the other commandments for which the Torah does advance a very clear and very strong spiritual explanation? Are they wearing tefillin? Are they having mezuzot on their doorposts of their home? Are they doing the other commandments for which we have explicit explanations about their spiritual connection? Or, when it comes to those, do they come up with a different explanation for avoiding it, making a rather incoherent and inconsistent web of reasons for rejection? You see, humans are remarkably creative creatures. If we don't want to do something, we will come up with an infinite number of reasons for why we don't want to do it. Ask anybody who's ever asked a child to clean their room. They will be very creative in coming up with why I don't want to, I can't do it, not right now, I'll do it later. But oftentimes failing or refusing to admit the underlying question. Now, there is no one-size-fits-all underlying question of why not. But that is something that we won't get to if we don't examine our own explanation. If we have decided for ourselves, oh, I'm not going to do mitzvah A because superficial reason, don't let yourself off the hook. Ask yourself, is that really the reason? Is that really the reason I'm not doing it? Or is there something else that is still, I'm uncomfortable with it? For example, with kashrut, perhaps it's not that it's inconvenient per se, but it's inconvenient when I'm out with friends. It's inconvenient when I'm doing something with work. It's inconvenient because I know that I will have to explain I'm Jewish and I can't. and that's going to perhaps put me in a feeling of awkwardness. Now, most of the time we don't want to admit that. We don't want to admit that we're worried what other people would think of us. We're all good, rugged individualists because we're American. But most of us do care what others think, and most of us, if we will really dig deep, will recognize that we are not 100% convinced that other people will truly understand and accept us the same as they do now when they recognize not only that we're Jewish, but that we care enough about our Judaism to moderate our menu. For many people, the price of admission into general society is seemingly predicated on leaving the bumpy bits of Judaism behind and having the title but none of the inconvenience of, well, now we're going to have to do something different because Tom can't go to Red Lobster with us because, well, it's Red Lobster. And now everybody's angry at Tom, and Tom doesn't get invited the next time. Maybe that's why Tom didn't mention it in the first place. When we dig deep, we'll find that there are often much more important underlying reasons that are keeping us, not just from kashrut, but from any mitzvah that we as an individual may be reluctant to undertake. There may be something else that is holding us back. Examine it. If you need help, make an appointment. I'm happy to talk with you and without judgment, recognizing that I myself have gone through many of these various thresholds and barriers, often having a reason in mind of why I wasn't doing a mitzvah, only to, upon examination, realize that that reason wasn't the real reason. And that you will find that when you fix the real reason, whether it be your relationship with your friends or with others, whether it be your understanding of your own spiritual life and spiritual journey, whether it be reconciling your own ambivalence about divinity in the world at all, that when you deal with those underlying issues, you will come out a much happier person, not only engaging in the mitzvot in a more meaningful and powerful way, but also engaging with yourself in a more honest and true way, recognizing what you do want, what you don't, and why. Our encounter with the mitzvot are a kind of therapy, very often, a kind of way to analyze our own inside a deep emotional and spiritual life. Don't rest for the superficial explanations. And if you want an extra challenge, figure out why you are doing the mitzvahs you are doing as well, not only the ones you are not yet going. So for example, why are you here tonight? You have made a choice that this mitzvah is one that you will embrace. What is the explanation for that? We can handle that conversation in our oneg over our dessert.